Hey folks, my name is Jean Tiberio, and I'd like to welcome you to Healing Outside the Box. I am a nutritionist and health coach by trade, and perhaps a wannabe schoolyard gardener. Now, I've been talking to a few mothers of school-age children, and I'm getting the feeling that kids are starting to get bored at home and might actually be doing things that would have created a big eye roll in the past. And one of those things might be learning how to start and grow a vegetable garden indoors to be planted outdoors at a later date. Because quite frankly, although it's really hard on school kids with the quarantine and all, the silver lining might be that we may be thinking about things to do that would be healthy that we may have not found time to do in the past. We could start our tomatoes in the house and plant them outside. Or maybe even grow things like scallions, onions, microgreens, lettuce, all indoors or on a porch, and simply pick them and eat them for supper. Now, FYI, I'm no expert gardener. The bits and pieces of stuff that I know about this comes basically from YouTube videos. In the past, I did do an outdoor class with first and third graders where we learned about the nutritional benefits of fruits and vegetables, and then planted some tomatoes, green beans, scallions, etc. in the schoolyard. The first graders were in charge of watering the dirt and then digging up earthworms with their little plastic spoons to put in our raised beds. The third graders actually planted the tomatoes, green beans, etc. Now, that's not going to happen this spring because school is out, obviously, but there's no reason why people like me, who are, I guess, early novices, can't do this at home. What I actually did was to round up lots of links that I found helpful. I'll put the links in the show notes if you're interested in looking up some of these videos. When I went looking for supplies, I noticed that the cherry tomato seeds were sold out everywhere, which means they're a hot item, somewhere between toilet paper and Legos. So maybe some of you are actually thinking along the same lines as I am. Now that we're stuck at home, we might have time to learn how to start a little container garden. There's ways you can grow lettuce or cherry tomatoes, pick off the food for supper, and allow the rest of the plant to keep growing. And if you get the organic seeds, you'll notice a difference in the flavor of these fruits and vegetables. And if they're full of flavor, they have more vitamins and minerals as well. Now, if you're listening to some of these YouTube videos like I am, it's a good idea to follow their instructions. Like, for example, using the organic potting soil instead of dirt from the backyard. And maybe while we're waiting for our scallions to grow, we could look up recipes with scallions on the World Wide Web. You get the picture. Seed to table growing and eating. In addition to container gardens, there are also community gardens that might open up in the next month or two, depending on what state you're from. I am from Salem, Massachusetts, and here we have a planning and community development department right within our city hall. So you could call your city hall in most cases to ask about community gardens. Also in Massachusetts, we have a program called Mass in Motion, which is a statewide program around healthy eating and active living. I'll give you a link in the show notes to the Massachusetts program. Other states may have similar programs to help you with the community or schoolyard gardens. There's also a really cool organization that started the Edible Schoolyards Project. I'll give you a link to that as well in the show notes. On that website, there are all kinds of gardening and nutrition education, PDFs, and videos. Okay, so first let's talk about the vegetables that you can start from your grocery store throwaway parts. The most common vegetables people like to restart in the soil are spring onions or scallions, smaller onions, garlic, and maybe even ginger. In addition to these being easy to restart, they're an everyday vegetable if you like to cook. And maybe this might be a good time to think about cooking a few of your favorite meals from scratch. Okay, for the first vegetable you can restart from the store is garlic. So, if you have a head of organic garlic in your refrigerator, take off 2 or 3 of the large cloves. Each of these cloves will grow a whole head of garlic. So you get the picture. Peel off the papery outer layer and then plant the garlic clove flat side down, about 2 inches deep and about 4 to 5 inches apart in loose organic soil. Then you water generously. So you could stick them in a large pot or plant them right in a raised bed garden. Most people like to plant garlic in the fall because it does take a while, maybe 8 to 9 months before you see the whole head. So if you want to plant the garlic in the fall, plant the garlic straight into the ground, and you can place dead leaves or mulch on top to keep the soil warm. If you plant the garlic in pots right now, you'll get stems about 1 foot tall in a few months, and in 5 months, the garlic bulbs will start to form. And then maybe 8 to 9 months to harvest the bulb. Oh, another thing, garlic is a natural pest repellent, so even if you don't get new garlic bulbs until the fall, you may be able to avoid those darn squirrels getting at your tulips or dahlia bulbs. Okay, scallions. Now these are easier to start in a jar of water. So you cut off the bottoms, leaving about 1/2 inch of the stem, and place them root side down in a jar of water. Once they re-root, place them in pots or in the garden. These scallions grow really well in the garden. Now, for white or red onions, once we buy the hopefully organic onion, we look at the 2 ends. One end is the shoot and the other end is the root. So one is the shoot and the other is the root. So we cut off about 1/4 from the root end, take that papery peel layer off, and put them in a mason jar with water. Leave them for 5 or 6 days. By that time, you should see the green shoots. Then plant them with loose potting mix, water them, and make sure to bury the roots, but not the shoots. Finito. Now, basil plants. These are really good to grow because fresh basil is relatively expensive. So I would start by buying a healthy-looking fresh basil plant or fresh basil leaves. Cut a stem of about 6 inches from the top of the plant. Then pinch off the leaves near the bottom where it will be submerged in water. Leave the top bunch of leaves. And again, after good root growth, put them in soil that is organic and loosely packed. Now, grow lamps will give you bushier, healthier basil plants, but you may not want to invest in that kind of a thing. The grow lamps can start at about $25 to $35, but those are the cheap ones. Then there's a $100 category that will give you some full spectrum light. You could grow tomatoes under those. The cream of the crop are companies like Spider Farm, but their grow lamps are over $300. Obviously, those types of grow lamps are for serious indoor gardeners. Now, once the basil starts to grow, you may want to prune them by cutting off the top and using it for cooking. If you cut off a long enough stem, you could even start a new plant. Again, I've got YouTube videos specifically for basil in things like onions and scallions. There's one YouTube video I'll add that goes over growing 11 vegetables just from the cuttings off of grocery store items. Now there's another YouTube channel called Daisy Creek Farms. They focus on growing high nutrient vegetables, and they have many videos about how to regrow these vegetables from the purchased vegetables. One good tip he mentioned was to cut the stems that are useless on the growing tomato plants. We used to call these stems suckers because they suck up the water and the nutrients, but don't produce tomatoes. They're the stem that grows in between the side stem and the main shoot. But you could cut those off and put them in water, and they'll produce roots. And then you can plant them all in potting soil. Okay, so that was starting from shoots. Let's talk about starting from seeds. Most people recommend you start this 6 to 8 weeks before the soil is ready, but it's already April, so this might be a good time. Now, they'll all tell you that raised beds are better, but a good plot of fresh soil will work. once they are small plants. To start from seed, you'll need a good loose potting mix that is preferably organic. I'll leave you a YouTube video in the show notes where she starts tomato seeds. You don't have to buy the whole expensive starter kit, but a good quality potting mix and some individual small containers are a good idea. Make sure you cut good holes for drainage. If you're looking to plant multiple tomatoes from seed, you could put 2 or 3 seeds per cup and then thin them out once they get to be a few inches high. In other words, give them individual cups, and then when they're 6 to 8 inches high, they may be ready for the soil. Now they want you to plant the tomato plants deep in the soil to get stronger roots. And one of the guys recommended organic rock phosphate, and that gives the plant more nutrition. So you'd put a little of that rock phosphate deep in the soil, keep the soil moist but not soaking, and plant the tomato plants at least 6 inches apart. And again, with the tomatoes, they will grow those what we call suckers, and you can pinch them off when you see them. They're also called armpit stems. Now, as we know, most tomatoes need some support as they grow up. Otherwise, they'll end up growing as a vine along the ground. I use bamboo poles, but you can use anything. So I recommend watching the specific video for the vegetable or herb that you are planting. I've just given you some general tips to give you an idea what you may want to do given your own windowsill space or backyard space, and certainly depending on the climate where you live. Now, in terms of nutrition, the nutritionally dense vegetables are deeper in color, generally speaking. The exception are the mushrooms. They're surprisingly high in a lot of the B vitamins, especially for a brown or tan vegetable. That's because they're basically in their own category, being a fungi and all. Now, what do I mean by deeper in color? Well, let's look at the peppers. The deep red peppers have the most vitamin A. Beta-carotene is basically responsible for the orange pigment, and the beta-carotene is basically 2 vitamin A's linked together. So vitamin A and beta-carotene are used interchangeably, basically the same thing. The yellow peppers, because they're not red, have less vitamin A. The deep green peppers are high in vitamin C and higher in the B vitamins. Deep red vegetables and fruits like tomatoes and strawberries also have lycopene, which is an excellent antioxidant. Red peppers also have lycopene. So the orange and yellow pigments are also due to the carotenoids, which is a bunch of related organic chemicals that make vitamin A. These are all good antioxidants, and also, in terms of vitamin A specifically, are shown to fight off the growth of cancer cells. Now, the blue and purple pigments are due to anthocyanins, which are in a group of substances called flavonoids. They have been shown beneficial in fighting heart disease. You may have heard back in the old days that red wine is healthy in that regard. It's actually the skin of the red grape that contains those beneficial chemicals. So it's also true about blueberries and eggplants. Now, the dark green leafy vegetables are always a good idea to add to your diet in healthy portions. They're rich in vitamins A and C. C is also an antioxidant. They also have folate and many of the other B vitamins. And they're a good source of minerals like potassium, iron, and calcium. In general, the deeper the green color, the richer they are in these vitamins and minerals. But don't forget your plain colored vegetables. We all know that garlic and onions add flavor to just about anything, but they also have nutrients as well. Garlic in particular has antioxidant properties and can possibly boost your immune system a bit. And who doesn't want that right now? Onions also contain small amounts of anti-inflammatory chemicals. Mushrooms, as I've mentioned, have a whole bunch of B vitamins. And while we're on the subject of general healthiness, spices and herbs are great to have around for adding flavor and nutrition to your body. Now, we may be packing on a few Corona pounds due to the fact that we are all sitting around the house watching Netflix and maybe stressing out a bit. So this is as good a time as any to think about maybe making some of these recipes with all your fruits and vegetables that you're buying and maybe even growing. I wanted to mention a new NIH study on home cooking and meal planning regarding weight control and insulin resistance. What they found, and this was, I don't know how they did it, but they say it was a double-blind study. It may have been a crossover study, actually. What that means is they switched the groups. They do maybe a month or two, one control study with people where the subjects eat a diet that is relatively high in fast foods and processed grocery items, in another group that is eating a lot of home-cooked meals with produce. Then they switched the groups. And as you can imagine, even after they switched the groups, there was some weight loss, lower body fat, less diabetes, and even less depression in the group that was doing more cooking and eating of the produce. Here's the overall takeaway. This might be a good time to recognize that our bodies need our respect. And yes, of course, I know no one eats perfectly, and there is no perfect food or magic pill on the horizon with which we can conclusively fight off this terrible virus. But perhaps we could look at it like this. If we want to go into battle with the best arsenal our body can muster up, we should give it the fuel that it needs. That's all I have for you today. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.